This is a Canon AE1 film camera related video. It's not going to be a long video. I'm just going to talk about a couple of points that I omitted in previous videos and to talk about one accessory. And although I have made two videos about this camera before, there are a few things that I didn't mention and I've subsequently had questions about them. And the first is this little window on the back. What's it for? Now, if we look at a later camera, the Canon T90, you can see there's a little window here, and through that window I can actually see the film cartridge, and I can tell that inside the camera there's Kodak Portra film, ISO 160, 36 exposures, and that's quite useful. Well, with the A1 there is no window, so if you haven't used the camera for a while, you might have forgotten what film's inside. So the idea of this little window is just to tear off the part of the box that the film came in and to put it in there, and that should give you all the information that you need: what type of film, what ISO, and how many exposures. Unfortunately, I haven't got a box to give you a real example, but I'll put a photo of what I'm trying to describe on the screen. The other question I've been asked is, what is this little socket here? It's exposed on this body. On my other A1 I've got a little cap to cover it, but I've lost it from this one. It's actually called a PC sync socket, and it's for flash photography. Now, with flash photography, because of the way that the shutter curtains work, there are two things that are very important. One is that you can't use a very high shutter speed. On this body it's limited to 1/60th of a second, and on sort of modern bodies it's 1/200th or 1/250th. And the other thing that's very important is during the process of taking a photo, when the shutter curtains are open, is when the flash is actually set off, that synchronization. If it's not right, then only part of the image will be exposed to the flash. Now, with a dedicated flash, and the dedicated flash for the A1 is the Canon 199A, the synchronization is done through the hot shoe, through these three pins on the flash and the hot shoe. Now, it's possible to use other flashes that aren't dedicated on the camera, but they don't sync through the hot shoe. So what they will have is the same kind of socket as this. The flash will also have a PC sync socket. This is a sync cord for a studio lighting set that I have. So one end goes into the camera and the other end goes into the flash or the studio lights, and that ensures that if you're using an external flash or studio lights, that the synchronization is correct. Now, if you're not using flash, you don't need to worry about this. If you're using a dedicated flash on the hot shoe, you don't need to worry. You only need to worry if you're using a flash on the camera that can't sync through the hot shoe. When you buy a camera from a big manufacturer like Canon, you don't just buy the camera, you buy into the complete system. And there's a big system now for Canon cameras, and it was the same back in the film days. There was a big system available, lots and lots of different accessories, and depending on what type of photography you were doing, some accessories are useful and some weren't. There's no automatic film advance on the A1. Whenever you take a photo, you need to manually advance the film. Now, it's not a big problem, and you soon get into the habit of automatically just moving your thumb up there and advancing the film every time you take a frame. But there are some options available if you don't want to do it manually and you want to do it automatically. One option is a motor drive that will give you about 5 frames per second. Another option is this Power Winder. This is the Power Winder A2. And it will advance the film at about 2 frames per second. Not particularly quick, but it just means that the film will be advanced automatically and you don't have to do it manually. Prior to this one, the Power Winder A2, there was a Power Winder A, which did basically the same thing, but I don't think it had this continuous and single frame switch. and it didn't have this little socket which allows you to use a remote release. And this one's also a bit wider, so when you sit the camera down, it's just a bit more stable. Also, with the Power Winder A, I believe you had to take your finger off the shutter release button before it would advance, and with the A2 that's not the case. And regarding this switch here, to switch between continuous shooting and single frame, I think it works differently depending on which body you use it with. You can use this on the Canon AE1, AV1, AE1, AE1-Program. And with some bodies, you do need to put it to C to get continuous shooting. But with other bodies, it doesn't matter if it's on C or S, provided you just keep the shutter button down, it will go into continuous mode. The power comes from 4 AA batteries, and when it was released, Canon recommended alkaline batteries, although you could use nickel cadmium. These days I just use nickel metal hydride rechargeable batteries for all my camera gear. That includes flashes and these power winders, and no problems at all. So the orientation of the batteries is shown on the outside of the case. Just put the batteries in and then close it up, and all these screws are designed so that you can use a coin. It's unlikely you're going to have a screwdriver out in the field, but you'll always have a coin. And with the batteries inside, it's all ready to go. Now obviously you need to get access to the film advance mechanism, and that's done through this hole here. So it's another little cap that can be removed with a coin. And this is quite small and could get easily lost. So what do you do with it when it comes off? And Canon have already thought about that. And on the Power Winder body, they give you a little slot here to put this into, to keep it safe and make sure it doesn't get lost. A very nice little thought from Canon. Once you've exposed the film advance mechanism, just put the winder on the camera, and it uses the tripod socket to secure it to the camera. And once again, you can use a coin. And if you still want to use a tripod, there's another socket on the Power Winder. With it on the camera, just set the switch to continuous or still. And as I said before, with the A1, it doesn't matter, because in either position, if I hold the shutter release button down, it will automatically go into continuous mode. So now, when I take a shot, you should hear the camera advance automatically. There we go, all ready for the next shot. So why would you want an automatic film advance mechanism for this camera? It could be that you're lazy, it could be that you want to look more professional, or it could be because you're operating the camera remotely and you don't want to go over to the camera every time you take a shot to manually advance the film. You know, for example, if you have a very long remote release cable. And for this camera, there's actually a wireless shutter release mechanism available. The accessory is called the LC1, and I do actually have one, but it's back in the UK somewhere. And on my last 2 trips to the UK, I haven't been able to find it. I just don't know where I left it. It comes in 2 parts. One part you hold, and it's got the shutter release button, and the other part sits on the hot shoe, so you can operate the camera completely wirelessly. And obviously, if you're doing that, you'll want a mechanism to advance the film automatically. This little red LED here illuminates when the film is finished. When you're advancing the film manually and the film comes to an end, you feel some resistance in the lever, so you know it's come to an end. Obviously, when you're using the Power Winder, you're not doing any manual advancing, you don't feel that resistance, so you need to know when the film is finished, and that's the purpose of that little LED. And when the film has come to an end and you need to rewind, you need to press in a little button on the bottom of the camera. Well, there's also a button on the bottom of the Power Winder, so that you can still do that without removing the power winder from the camera. I think I've covered everything, but if there is something I've omitted, please let me know in the comments. If you're doing photography where you're releasing the shutter remotely, it's quite important to have something to advance the film automatically. If you're just doing regular photography, it's not that important, it's just a nice to have accessory. There are still quite a few available. You should be able to pick them up in used camera shops, and there are lots on eBay. Okay, that's about it. So if you have any questions, comments or other feedback, please leave them below, and thank you for watching.